Well, good afternoon. It's good to be back again. Today I'm going to be talking some about atheism and why I think it makes more sense to believe in God than to not believe in God. I'm going to give a couple reasons why I think that's the case, and then also I want to give one reason why I think that believing in the Christian God specifically makes the most sense. I'm going to try to do that all today. I may not have enough time to do it all today, and if I don't, I'll finish in next week's video. But we're going to try to get to all of that today. So the first reason that I think it makes more sense to believe in God than to not believe in God, well, I think it makes more sense to believe in the Christian God specifically, has to do with epistemology. Now, don't turn your brain off yet. I get that that's a big word, but I'm going to unpack it. Epistemology is basically a word used in philosophy meaning a theory of knowledge. Basically, to do epistemology is to ask the question, how do I know? And basically, it's the set of philosophical ideas associated with knowing, how do we know anything? Now, the atheist, I can't say that this is true for all atheists. I would have to know what every atheist thinks, but it seems to me like at least most of the ones that I've listened to ascribe to sort of an empiricism, sort of an empirical sense of epistemology. And what I mean by empiricism is that it has to do with primarily observation, the five senses, that sort of thing. If I can't test it, if I can't hear it, see it, touch it, smell it, taste it, then I've got no reason to believe in it. That sort of thing. But I don't think that really works for an epistemology. I don't think that really, works when it comes to figuring out how do we know anything that we know. A few reasons. First of all is, how do we know for certain that we can trust our five senses? I don't really know if there is a way that we can know for certain that we can trust our five senses. I mean, we generally do rely on our five senses, but those things can, be incorrect sometimes. I mean, sometimes people hallucinate, things like that. And for all we know, we could all be in the Matrix or something like that. So there's no way to know for certain that we can trust our five senses. And then also when it comes to science, testing things, using the scientific method, the tricky thing is, on what basis can we do science without simply assuming that tomorrow will be like today? That's something you have to assume to be able to do science. And what I mean by that is, science relies on observation, testing, and that sort of thing. And just to give you an example, what if we woke up tomorrow and the Earth's gravity had decreased drastically? That's going to shake things up a whole lot in the sciences. It's going to change a lot of stuff. And so in order to sufficiently do science, you pretty much have to assume that tomorrow will be like today. There's no way to really know that. And that's a pretty big assumption when something that is central to your theory of knowledge, central to your way of knowing what you know, has to be simply assumed, and you can't know for certain. And so we can't trust our five senses. We have to have some sort of basis on which to do science, but I don't know that atheism can give that basis, being that there's no way for us to know for certain that tomorrow will be like today on atheistic principles. So that's some problems related to epistemology. And it seems to me that based off these facts and similar related facts, in order to really know anything, you have to either know everything yourself or you have to know someone who does. I mean, think about it. You have to be able to know that you can trust your five senses. You can't just assume it. And we could talk about issues of probability versus improbability, but I want to know, how can we know? You can't know that tomorrow is going to be like today. You can assume it, but you can't know it. So in order to know anything, you yourself have to either know everything, which is impossible. No one knows everything. No humans, at least. Or you have to know someone who does. And God knows everything. And so Christians, and I think most, if not all, religious people would take what's called a revelational epistemology. The reason that we ultimately know anything is because God has shown it to us. And also this God who created the universe and everything in it has revealed himself to us through his word. And that's how we know anything. Because there is a sovereign God who controls all nature, all time, all space, the entire cosmos, we can know that tomorrow will be like today. Because God's a God of order, not a God of chaos. He's not going to go and change things up on us on that grand of a scale. We can know that we generally can trust our five senses, and we can know in some ways when to not trust them, because God has shown us these things through revealing these things to us in his word. So that's the first issue, issue of epistemology. How do we know what we know? And the second big thing that I want to talk about when it comes to Christianity versus atheism is issues of morality. How do we know what's right and what's wrong? On what consistent basis can we call anything right? On what consistent basis can we call anything wrong? And I really don't think that atheists have any good reason to say that something is right or wrong. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that atheists aren't moral people. I've known atheists that were very moral people, had a really great sense of right and wrong. So I'm not saying that they're immoral. I'm saying that I don't think they have any consistent basis to say that something's right or wrong. And so, first of all, when it comes to morality and truth, I think we should just throw the idea of relevant truth and relative morality out the window. I don't see how that can work in any way. One of my heroes, who's now gone on to be with the Lord, Dr. R.C. Sproul, said, in his typical clever and hilarious fashion, if you want to see if someone believes in relative truth, steal his wallet. And he said in a pretty funny way, but it holds some truth value. We all kind of have, sort of within ourselves, this sense of, there's things that are absolutely right and there's things that are absolutely wrong. And we can sort of abstractly philosophize that, there's this thing called relevant truth. But when someone wrongs you personally, you're not going to hold to that consistently. You're just not. And so this idea of relative truth, oh man, spilt tea on my shirt, excuse me. This idea of relative truth, relative morality, just, I don't think can work. It's inconsistent. It just won't work. And so some atheists may say that morality is just a societal norm. Whatever a society decides is right or wrong, for that society, it is right or wrong. But I want to challenge that idea, because pretty much everyone, whether Christian or atheist, or other religions too, just about all of us will condemn the Nazis. But if you hold to this idea that societies determine what's right and wrong, you can't consistently condemn the Nazis. Because German society as a whole at that time decided that it was right to murder Jews and all these other groups that they murdered. And I don't think any of us would agree with that, whether Christian or atheist. I mean, I condemn the Nazis, and I think that all the atheists, my atheist friends, would too. But I think that I have a consistent basis to do so, because those Jewish people and all the other people that were murdered by the Nazis were image bearers of God, and also God tells us to not murder, just to name a couple reasons found in God's Word as to why that was wrong. But I don't think that on a purely atheistic thought system you can have good reasons to condemn that. Now, once again, I want to be clear. I know that the atheist will condemn the Nazis. But I'm just saying I don't think they have a sufficient basis to do it, to be clear. And so we can't go with relevant truth. We can't go with it just being dictated by society, because the societal idea, I mean, that's basically might makes right. If you have the majority, if you have the most power, then, I mean, you're going to be able to dictate what the majority of the society is going to believe, what they're going to call right or wrong. So that's another reason to ban that, because it boils down to might makes right, which is really counterintuitive to most, if not all of us. And then I think probably the best atheist argument for, morality on an atheist system is that it's what's best for the survival of the human species. And like I said, I think that's the best argument they have, but I don't think in the end it really works. I think that atheism often can do well enough at telling us what is, but does a poor job at telling us what ought to be. And so the idea here is that morality sort of evolved along with us, and over time, what we now call moral is just the actions that were best for human survival. For example, those that, murdered their young, for example, didn't survive. Eventually they all died out. And then, we humans today, microevolution, natural selection, all that, we just adapted the behaviors that helped us to survive. Okay. That may be true, but it tells us what is, but not what ought to be. And so my thing is, this seems to assume at bottom that we as human beings have some inherent value. And as a Christian, I certainly believe that. We have value as human beings because we're made in God's image. He said that we are valuable. We're more valuable than anything else. But you don't have anything like that on atheistic principles. There's no reason to assume that human beings have just sort of objective, inherent value. And you may say, well, I think that it's good for the human species to survive because I'm a human, and therefore I like the idea of us surviving. Well, cool. I can understand that. But what if, say, for example, there's someone who disagrees, who just does not care if the human species survives? In fact, maybe they would prefer it if we didn't. Now, you and I would both say this person's a psycho and, needs to probably be put in prison or a psych ward or something where he can't hurt himself or other people. Yeah, I mean, we're agreed there. This person is a psycho, and probably dangerous because he wants to hurt people. He's not beneficial to human society as a whole. But once again, I have a basis to go back to as to why it matters that the human race survives. Why, a person or an event or, anything that's dangerous to humanity should be dealt with, and why human survival matters. And so at that point, you could say, well, basically, like, why does it matter if we survive or not? Plenty of other species have come and gone already, had lived on this earth and then became extinct, and we might have cared about them for a while, but after they were gone, we didn't care anymore. But there's something, I think, inherent in all of us, in our heart of hearts, that knows that human beings are special. That we have some sort of value. And that there's some reason why we ought to survive. There's some reason why it's better to love your neighbor than to eat your neighbor. And back to the psychopathic person, if you say, this person's dangerous, and I think it's very clear that that person should be locked up because they're dangerous. Yes, I agree, but how can you consistently say that this person is wrong in not wanting humanity to flourish, and that you are right in wanting humanity to flourish, if there's no objective, inherent value in humans? If we're just highly evolved primates, if that's all we are, if we're just stardust, basically, at the end of the day, why does it matter if stardust bumps into stardust and how stardust bumps into stardust? I think if there's no God, then we don't really have any objective, inherent value, and therefore it doesn't matter. So yeah, epistemology and morality, that's kind of the two big reasons why I think it makes more sense to believe in God than to not. And you could say, okay, that brings us to sort of a general theism. But, just about any religion can give, these two things that you've talked about. Okay, yeah, that's kind of true. But why do I think the Christian God specifically is the best one, is the one true God? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but I think the biggest one and the most compelling one is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, a few things. One big objection to the resurrection of Jesus especially, and the miracles in general, was proposed by David Hume, who basically said that, it's much more likely that Christians, or religious people in general possibly, are mistaken than for the natural laws of the world to be suspended. Okay, here's the thing. If you're presupposing a purely naturalistic worldview, where all the world is just, time and chance acting on matter, where there's no spiritual aspect, if it's just matter, and it's all just natural, then yes, Hume would be quite right in saying that it's much more likely that we're mistaken than for, the laws of nature to be temporarily suspended. If his worldview is true. If you presuppose that worldview is true. But if God exists, and I sincerely believe that he does, then that argument doesn't really carry much weight. Because if God exists, it makes perfect sense that miracles would happen. I mean, God created this universe, and He can do with it however He pleases. And so if He wants to show us His power through miracles, most especially the resurrection of Jesus Christ, He can certainly do it because He's God. So that objection doesn't quite work. And another reason I think why we should believe in the resurrection of Jesus and why we should believe that Jesus is God, why we should be Christians, is because all 11, Judas hung himself after his betrayal. But the 11 other apostles, they all were heavily persecuted, and all of them except John were killed for their faith. Either by the Roman state or on mission fields in foreign lands. They were all killed for their faith. And here's the thing, you don't die, you don't give your life for something that you know is a lie. And you may say, well, like, Muslim jihadists, did the suicide bomb thing, and as a Christian, you believe that that's a lie, right? Yes. And I'm not saying that people won't give their lives for a lie, because it's obvious that sometimes people do. But you don't give your life for something that you know is a lie. That's an important difference. When you know something's a lie, you don't give your life for it. And if Jesus had not resurrected, it would have been painfully obvious. Because He had opponents who were betting everything against Him being resurrected. If Jesus hadn't resurrected, all the Romans or the Jewish authorities would have had to do would be produce His corpse. Show everyone in Jerusalem, hey, He's still dead. But they couldn't do it because He did resurrect. And the apostles knew this. And so they were willing to give their lives for this because it was true that Jesus resurrected, proving that He Himself was God, and that the gospel is true, and that anyone who will turn from their sins and believe on Jesus Christ will be saved. They'll find Him to be a powerful and a perfect Savior. This is the truth that the apostles died for. And I think it's painfully obvious that if Jesus hadn't resurrected, they would have never given their lives for Him. 10 of them were killed. John was the only one that wasn't killed, and it wasn't because people weren't trying. The Romans tried to kill this guy. The only reason he lived was because God preserved him, because God wasn't done with him yet. John had to write Revelation, the last book of the New Testament. Or else they certainly would have killed him. And so it's like I said, you don't die for something you know is a lie. And so I think that really confirms that the gospel is true, that Christianity is true, and it makes sense to be a Christian. So that's kind of just all I really want to talk about today. Once again, I think it makes the most sense to be a Christian specifically instead of an atheist, because I don't see how atheists have a sufficient basis to know anything really, to even do science, whereas we Christians do. I don't see how they have a sufficient basis to call anything right or wrong, to make moral claims, whereas we Christians do. And I especially believe that you should believe in the Christian God because He resurrected. And we can know this because the apostles gave their lives for it, and you don't give your life for something that you know is a lie. Well, hope y'all enjoyed this, hope you benefited from it. If you did enjoy it or benefit from it, maybe give me a like, subscribe, tell a friend. Until next week, go love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Glorify God in all that you do. Thanks for watching.